Good evening all and welcome. Forewarning, tonight's episode doesn't have a vast collection of horrifying and disturbing stories. There are a few pretty grim ones, but for the most part, these stories are just interesting and entertaining. I hope that will suffice your listening needs for tonight. But for now, it's time to get comfortable. Grab your flashlights and let the darkness take control. In our first year dorm at school, there was a panel that looked a little different from other panels on a mahogany panel wall. Other panels were clearly part of the overall wooden panel, but this particular one looked as if it was tacked on with a few screws, which were painted with a dark paint to match the mahogany color. The school was an 18th century mansion, which was converted into an orphanage during the Spanish flu epidemic in 1918, and then reconverted into a boarding school in the early 1930s. But we were first years, so new to the school, albeit too scared to do anything about it. Cue wild speculation about the odd panel, ghosts, serial killers, skeletons hiding behind it. Well, sometime during our second year, we got talking about the old panel and decided to investigate. While everyone was out, two friends and I went to the first year dorm with a toolbox that we borrowed from a woodwork room. Undoing those screws wasn't easy. Years worth of paint, dust and dirt were in them, and after an hour we got them all out. We pulled off the odd panel. There was a white sliding door, about 16 inches wide and 14 inches long, with a small Art Deco glass knob in the brick wall behind the panel wall. We pulled the slide door open. There were a lot of ropes at one side where there used to be a side wall. Seems as if someone ripped that side wall out. We realized that it was a dumbwaiter. We also realized immediately it offered us an advantage. The 2 floors below our floor were strictly off limits to us kids. We never knew what was in those rooms, so we thought this was a chance to find out. The smallest friend climbed into the dumbwaiter and left the sliding door open. Me and the other friend pulled the ropes to lower the dumbwaiter. We were kind of nervous because those ropes felt so dry we thought they'd break apart. When the smallest friend spotted the second dumbwaiter door, he tried to push it open, but it was blocked by something behind the door. We discussed the pros and cons of lowering him down further to the next floor. We weren't sure whether the ropes could handle the smallest friend's weight if we were to pull him back up. The smallest friend started to get uneasy. He had no way of getting out of the dumbwaiter box if it was trapped. The other friend was like, "Screw it, let's lower him some more." We pulled the ropes, and the box got stuck when it angled awkwardly on its way down. I climbed through the dumbwaiter door and made my way down to the brick hole and used one foot to stomp on the box to righten the angle. That's when it got a little bit messed up. I did it so well that it corrected itself and fell cleanly down the hole, with my smallest friend screaming his head off. The other friend tried to halt the fall by grabbing the ropes, but it burnt some skin off his hand. The ropes were hitting me in the face while I tried not to slip and fall. We heard a loud crash at the bottom, about 2 minutes of dead silence and fear, and the smallest friend from the bottom shouted, "I'm all right, you useless pricks." I climbed down the hole to rescue him, but the box was intact. We couldn't break the box to free him, so he kicked the third dumbwaiter door open and climbed out. Then I heard voices in the mysterious room. Turned out, the third dumbwaiter door was an entry to our housefather's private flat. Oops. While the housefather shouted at the smallest friend in the flat, I shimmied back up to our dorm floor, and we hurriedly screwed the odd panel back to the wall when the housefather walked in with the smallest friend. That little adventure earned us a 2-week suspension and 100 demerit points each. They also removed the dumbwaiter boxes and ropes and covered the dumbwaiter door with a brick wall and inserted even more screws into the odd panel. There was some construction being done for a new building at my university. So one day my buddy and I meet some nice girls at a bar. and as the evening gets late, they ask to smoke a joint with us. For whatever reason, we decide that the construction site for the new building would be a great location for this, and we go to it. 15 minutes in, and my buddy lets me know that there are cops watching us, so it's time to dip. We start to casually walk away when the girls decide to book it immediately, drawing sirens. My friend taps me on the shoulder and reminds me that chivalry is dead. Those girls are on their own, and he has a spot to hide. He takes me to a half-constructed elevator shaft for the new building, and we climb all the way down to the bottom where we found a massive underground network of tunnels, and when I say massive, I mean multiple channels of each, which are multiple kilometers long. At this point we're pretty drunk and high, and decide to see how far this thing goes. Every 500 meters or so, there would be a wooden barrier, but a few quick flying body checks made short work of them, and we continued on our way. Eventually, we found a ladder and hatch and decided that we came too far in to not see what was up. So we climb and go through and find ourselves in a locked room in the middle of the university library, about a kilometer and a bit from where we started. A janitor walked in and caught us clearly doing something we weren't supposed to, but I pulled my best Seymour Skinner impression and said we're just trying to find a way out of there. Thankfully he bought it, or was too confused as to how we got into the locked room in the first place, and decided it was best to let us leave without further questions. We didn't find anything too exciting in the tunnels, a few empty beer bottles from decades back, and some white power graffiti, and that's about it. But I made it home without a possession, and/or a trespassing charge, so I'll call that a win. This happened, for those of you interested, at the University of Windsor. I was in my second year of college, and my girlfriends and I wanted to hit up a new club that had just opened recently in downtown Toronto, the now defunct Circa. The only problem was that we went to a school in Etobicoke, which is technically now part of the Greater Toronto area, but the only way to get there would be to take an hour-long transit ride, not worth it because our bus from the subway station stopped at 10 p.m, or drive. Monique, Josie and I enlisted our friend Ashley to drive us because she wanted to come, but she hadn't been eating and was feeling sick, so she didn't want to drink. Great, a designated driver. We pre-drank, played drinking games, got into Ashley's car and rode our way to the club. The club was a lot of fun until my friends and I noticed Ashley passed out on the ground. Turns out she had been drinking cranberry and vodkas all night and was absolutely smashed. We hauled her upstairs to a lounge area to figure out what to do next, and she suddenly runs to the bathroom to throw up. I follow her and notice she is throwing up blood. Freaking out, I navigate her back to the lounge area and try to figure out what to do with my other friends. She absolutely refused to visit the hospital. She was beyond wasted and didn't have her health card on her, so we decided to grab some food instead. We drag her out of the club and head over to Subway, on Queen, about a block from said club. While we're eating, a group of guys are chatting us up. We asked them what we should do, and they gave us a bunch of hostels to try out. We thank them and leave, and try to get Ashley to leave, but it isn't happening. She refuses. She wants to eat her soup first. Groaning, Monique, Josie and I decide to let her finish it. While we are waiting, this group of Armenian guys come in. They sit in the booths around us talking to us, and one guy in particular is interested in me and kept asking me to do it with him in the bathroom of the basement. I was creeped out and said it wasn't a good idea. He asked for my phone number, so I gave him a fake one. He called it and asked why it didn't ring. I said my battery was dead. Ashley was taking her sweet time eating her soup when all of a sudden I had to pee bad. I asked Monique to come with me to the bathroom and she agreed. As we were getting up, all of the guys around us got up and followed us downstairs. As we get to the washroom, all I see is Monique slam the door behind me and say, "What are you doing?" The one guy who was interested in me said, "Let me through, baby." She responded with, "I thought you had to go to the bathroom." "She can go to the bathroom herself, you can wait." I finished my business, washed my hands and opened the door, and all of a sudden the guys start forming a circle around us. At this point we were freaked the hell out. So, before they got a chance to really do anything, we shove our way through, practically fly up the stairs and barge into the restaurant and scream at Ashley and Josie to get up and that we're leaving. The four of us then dive into a cab that was conveniently driving near us, and we tell him to just drive, wherever. Needless to say, I was horrified. Honestly, it was one of the most terrifying moments of my life. The year was somewhere between 2003 and 2004. I was a college student at a moderately well-known university. I come from humble roots, and not wanting to go into crushing debt, I decided to go to the campus job office and look for part-time work. What they had that fit my schedule and body type was the position of sanitation engineer for the music department. While there was a section of the building devoted to scholastic pursuits, my job included cleaning the attached concert hall. It was a really beautiful place, 3 tiers in the lobby, seating to the roof and plush carpet. The place reminded you of something that you would see in black and white film, where men would wear tails and women fine evening gowns. Usually the work was broken down into specialities. Whomever did the best at a particular job got that job. At first I was the vacuum guy. Imagine pushing a regular-sized vacuum around 6 times the size of a regular home, and the pattern left on the floor had to be just so. I was in my early 20s at the time, and I caught half glimpses of him here and there, just enough to make you wonder, did I see something? He was a bit like my Slender Man, always in the periphery of my view. I was never quite sure if I'd seen him or not. By the second semester I was in the job, we got a new guy who was slow. Not much of a conversationalist, but I'd be damned if the man could not run that vacuum like the rebrand of floor cleaning. And he did that work while I moved over to glass detail. Not ordinary window cleaning, we're talking about how one whole side of the building is made entirely of glass, cleaning it all the way from floor to ceiling. It was when I got on the detail that I realized that I wasn't just seeing shadows, because when the sun would come in, just at the right angle while cleaning the glass, it reflected perfectly, like a mirror. At the end of each floor at the stairwell, there were windows, at the landing overlooking the walkway across the back of the building near the glass wall. That's where I finally got my real look at this man. In the reflection, I could see him standing in the window watching me work, perhaps eating. The reflection was unclear. You could only really see the shape of him, movement, gestures, etc. It looked like if I was going to run, he would slink to the side of the window frame or duck behind the wall as to not be seen. Now, no one was supposed to be in there with us as we worked, and I was a bit wary because I worked with a few girls in the building, and while I could take care of myself, their safety was of concern. One in particular was a gorgeous blonde Canadian girl who lit up any room she was in with her infectious positivity. I regret to inform you that she was nearly raped in her dorm room weeks before this happened, as someone slipped past the security door and found the door to her room unlocked. Pretty horrible. That wouldn't be happening in this hall on my watch, or so I thought, at the time, full of white knight piss and vinegar. One day I'm going about my work and notice the guy's watching me. I slowly turn and cause him to step out of view, and I walk down under the overhang and bolted down the first flight of stairs over to the next flight up, and I went racing to catch the guy. I'm a big dude and there's no way of me doing that quietly, so the guy hears me coming and all of a sudden he's gone. I don't see him on the landing, so I immediately head up the next flight of stairs where I don't see him either, or over the balcony that overlooks the whole hall. Both floors have a clear view of the lobby from front to end. This man just vanished. I tried and failed several times. After that, the guy was always vanishing in the same areas of the building. He began to taunt me. I'd run to the 3rd floor so he'd make noise and an appearance on the 2nd, and one day, the closest day I got to a date, I hatched a plan. The layout was thus: staircases at each end connecting the 1st and 2nd and 3rd floor, and a convoluted staircase in the center that connected to the 3 by bridges leading to a spiral center staircase. So I enacted my plan. I charged after him, and predictably went to the third floor. I didn't even bother looking around, I just immediately went to the bridge and laid on my belly and slid down the spiral to the second. He assumed I was on the third floor looking and made some noise. That was my cue to stand up. I bolted across the bridge. I got within grabbing distance as he reached the door to the stairwell and lunged at his shoulder, blocking him, throwing him through the door. While I got back to my feet, and he was a bit quicker, he managed to tie a shirt around the handle on the inside so I couldn't get to him and promptly vanished. Things got quiet for a few weeks, but then he started to get brave again, almost like a mouse. He went into hiding until the coast was clear and then he came back out. The final encounter finally rolled around. The girls were in the theatre cleaning the seats and floors. The vac guy was out in the student area, so it was just me and my antagonist. I used his own trick against him. I illegally chained the doors in and one set of stairs just so. Then I started the chase and flushed him into the route I had set up to trap him in. It was a long run, but this guy was at least in his 30s and thin, and I was in my early 20s and built like a brick. So I gave chase but also pulled hidden chains out and locked floor 2 behind us. It was payback time. It was all to culminate on the landing that I first saw him. But when he rounded the corner, I reached the landing and he was gone. I didn't hear him above or below running onto the chained doors. He had to be there. That's when his fatal mistake was exposed. He left the force wall open just a crack. When I kicked it in, there was no one, but there was a long, dark crawl, and I could see him moving at the other end. So I ripped past the crawl, and unbeknownst to him, I'd chained 1 and 3 at the end, and since I was following him, he couldn't turn back. The only way up or down was the central spine, where other workers who'd now assembled in the lobby would join in the hunt. As I closed in, he got antsy and started running on the second floor, maybe to go down the spiral or run in the door that I had chained on the other side. Either way, I was on him. And when I got close enough, I shoulder blocked him again and sent him sliding across the floor. We both recovered, and I took up a fighting stance and closed on him. He just put up his hands out of breath and said, "Okay." I grabbed him by his shoulders and asked him what he was doing there, and he told me his story. The guy had fallen on pretty hard times, and he'd started sleeping in the main hall under the stage. At night he'd poked around and found the service access under the mezzanine and set up a place to live under there. I told him I was sorry, but that was not okay and I had to kick him out. I then went into his little hidey hole and found he was actually living pretty good there. He had cooking equipment, a charger, a TV, and a nice sleeping bag. Very clean and hygienic to boot. The story doesn't quite end there. Having gotten his perspective and his motives, I just left his kit where it was and closed up the access, put the chain off the doors and never saw the guy again. At least I don't think I did. But I could have sworn on a few occasions I caught something out of the corner of my eye, now and again. This didn't happen to me personally, but my old neighbor when I was growing up. You see, they moved into an older house and found a secret crawl space. They decided to investigate. The thing that they noticed the most was a black trash bag. Ominous indeed. What could it be filled with? Treasure? Money? Or something that was meant to be kept hidden? They decided to investigate. They cut through each and every layer, as there were many trash bags stacked. When they reach the final layer, they discover something that makes them instantly regret their decision. Inside was a tiny corpse of a dead baby. A customer in a small Midwestern state bought an old building that was well over 100 years to use as office space. During renovations, they discovered a secret meeting space upstairs that was jam-packed with KKK stuff. It was well hidden, and no one knew how long it had been there or could enlighten anyone to the dark history of the space. Clearly used as headquarters or a meeting room, but long disused. The customer worried about what to do with the contents, afraid to even throw it away, and was horrified to be even associated with it in such a direct manner. He was afraid that it would appear in his trash. I don't know what they did end up doing with it. I visited a friend of mine at his stepfather's house after school one day. Their garage had one of those oil change pits in the floor where you can stand to work on your car instead of jacking your car up. We were checking out the pit when we noticed a small, dirty manhole cover on the floor, large enough for us, but no one larger. We opened it to reveal a thin shaft leading under the house and a janky handmade rebar ladder. We climbed down it to investigate, obviously. The air was dense and stale, and it felt useless to breathe. It was so dark that our cell phone screens and flashlights barely illuminated anything. What we could see were two small rooms separated by doorways with no door. In one room was a table with some jars and shelves holding the same. No food in them, just empty. More alarming were the shackles embedded in the floor and the ceiling, and the old pulley system strewn about the edges of the room. Torture? Torsion, I simply don't know. The other room contained a small toilet with a small sink. Both were clearly visible and handmade of clay, but impressive nonetheless, and I'd heard nothing about it ever since. I lived in a house that was part of the Underground Railroad, and one time we had to take down a wall in the attic stairway. The drywall was cracked and falling apart, and we found a board that could be slid away on rollers, and behind it was a space big enough for about 5 people. And the kicker was we found an old shoe, like someone was hiding there and lost it. Years ago, surely. I used to work at the United States House of Representatives. The 2 secret subways for the House and the Senate are pretty well known and not that impressive. I heard the president has his own private subway too, and it can go between the Pentagon, the White House, and the Capitol, but that just could be a rumor. The Capitol building is filled with secret passages, but I don't know what I'm allowed to say, but there are plenty of false grates and hidden doors that allow everyone from VIPs to interns to move about the Capitol without bumping into crowds or tourists. My old high school was built in the 1800s. It's a very beautiful building that's 4 stories tall. There are a lot of stairs throughout the building, and near one corner of the building are stairs that no one ever uses, very far from all the classrooms, you see. Well, during my senior year, my buddy and I were wasting time and just wandering the halls, when we get to the stairs that we seldom used. We were on the bottom floor and noticed that there were stairs leading down to another level below. So we went down them and noticed they led to a door which was cracked open. We went inside the door and it led to a large room filled with cubicles and dozens of employees on computers. The weird thing was, none of these employees were school staff. We were seniors and we'd seen everyone for 4 years. We were confused and left. We tried to return a few times later, but the door leading to the room was always locked. This was in 2006. I still wonder who the hell those people were. The place I lived in throughout undergraduate was a bit of a Frankenhouse, obvious large additions from what was likely a 2-bedroom. One of the walk-in closets had a slanted wall that we discovered had a secret door leading to a small storage area. Not much in there, just empty cardboard boxes and shelves. We later discovered some creepy doll furniture and oil paintings of a baby in the attic, so we decided to have some fun with the next tenants. We hung up the paintings so that when you opened the secret door it was the first thing you saw, and set up the doll furniture on the shelves in the hidden room. We got some dolls and disassembled them, and made dioramas on each shelf, murder scenes and the like. To top it off, we dripped wax from red candles all over the scene and burned down some white candles like they had been lit frequently. We put 5 candles and a pentagram on each shelf and never opened the room again. To this day, I wish we could go back to see if the current occupants discovered or heard about any of the weird stuff in that house. I would have loved to have seen their reaction if or when they discovered that secret room. Where I lived in South Carolina, we had this house that had dormer windows. I was young, so didn't own the home. But it was always a mystery as to how to get to the windows. I had an upstairs room, and the window access should have just been walled in, or so I thought. Turns out there was a hidden hinge door and a push-away panel. I found this by leaning against it and falling through. The passage led to the dormer window, a storage area with a chest I never opened, and cut across the whole upstairs to the other bedroom, which had the exact same thing. The chest was tattered and nasty looking. I assumed it had junk the previous people didn't want. I got into a lot of trouble right around the same time of this room, so my discovery and the stay at the home was not a long one. Looking back, it was probably over 30 years old, considering the state of the chest/storage area, and with what I now know about the home, makes me more keen as an adult to try and buy it. My high school had a very big basement that used to be a giant bomb shelter, with several adjoining tunnels for older utilities that were never used. After having not been used for a long time, the folks at the school decided to see what was down there and to clean out some of the older stuff, as schools tend to do. In addition to what one might expect, old chairs, tables, stuff that has been decaying there like books, they stumbled across something they did not expect. It turns out that hiding underneath my high school was a 2,100-year-old authentic Egyptian mummy in a sarcophagus. Now, it sounds almost like the most ridiculous children's book ending to a story, but it's completely true. For a while, they used it as a method to teach history and even rearranged the curriculum to suit it. But in the end, they ended up putting it in a proper display case. And due to some reasons as to how the school got it and questioning the ethics and such, it wasn't able to be donated to a museum. So there it resides, still at the school, and is on display in the history department. I grew up in a house built in the 1690s in central Massachusetts. It's a colonial salt box style house with 2 floors. On the second floor there's a closet with a false wall in the back. It slides up, and there's a second closet behind it with a trap door in the floor. It's a small ladder that goes down to basically a third closet that's located and behind a built-in bookshelf on the first floor. According to the town's local historical society, it was a secret room, built so the early settlers could hide in case of Native American attacks following King Philip's War. When I was in junior high, my friend's father was a contractor and built his family a house with a secret passage that connected all the kids' bedrooms via small doors in their closets. We later found out he had to lie to the town building committee and claimed it was a crawl space for storage because it was too small, 3 feet high, 3 feet wide, to legally be a hallway due to fire codes. All the man wanted to do was to fulfill every kid's dream. He was a cool guy. My friend worked in the Mary King's Close in Edinburgh, which is a place that does guided tours of the underground city. You see, when the population of Edinburgh began to grow hundreds of years ago, they built on top of the old city, and this old city is now miles and miles of tunnels and buildings right underneath the Edinburgh we know today. Most of the old city has been blocked off for safety reasons, but Mary King's Close has a few streets you can wander down to get the feel for life back in the 1600s. For a while, the Close have been trying to unblock bricked-off streets so they have a larger area of the old city for people to explore, but without much luck, as stuff like possible cave-ins and dead ends happen, as well as generally unsafe areas. That is until my friend told me that they discovered something that they thought was just a boarded-up wall at the back of one of the caverns, which turned out to be some sort of massive wooden door. They found the remnants of hinges on one side and a small keyhole on the other. I wonder what was behind it. This was a few years ago. I'm not sure if they managed to do anything about it yet. I hope they have, as there are so many streets down there that haven't been roamed in hundreds of years, and there must be some interesting stuff down there for us. My high school was originally an all-boys training academy for Canadian soldiers during World War I. There was a tunnel built before the war under the school that connected it to older parts of downtown. Apart from the crazy high levels of asbestos, it is home to dozens of piles of folders and records and letters documenting the lives of the World War I soldiers who trained at my school and ended up in World War I. To many budding historians and some other people, this would probably be incredibly fascinating and interesting. It's quite spectacular, and the tunnel itself is supposedly many kilometers long and super scary. If you go down there, you'll find about 1.2 kilometers of broken wooden barriers. I heard of someone who was high and drunk when they broke the barriers down. I imagine that in that darkness, perpetual as it is, and semi-infinite when you're down there, they turned back around and wished not to proceed for what they may find. I go to a university in Ontario, Canada, that was built in the 60s. The whole campus has a series of steam tunnels and old pedestrian tunnels that were used when the school opened so people could get around campus indoors. At some point the tunnels were closed, but over the years people kept finding ways in to explore, party, graffiti, as well as other stuff. One of the older Frosh bosses, for the art students, used to take first years he deemed worthy on little excursions through the old tunnels, and by the end they were always so disoriented with a maze of steam tunnels and black stairwells that he would finally take them to a door and open it, and they would be on the roof of one of the tallest buildings in campus. This is the same university where they found the tunnels dug into a forested area on campus, complete with sub-pumps, generator and lights. A lot of friends knew the guy that dug it, and it was just a bunch of engineering students. The police and media were worried it was tied to a terrorist plot on the Pan Am Games being held there that year, but it was all just used by students to smoke weed and hang out in, primarily just because they could. As a kid growing up, I lived in a small town in western New York, about an hour south of Rochester. Town name, Naples. A friend and I were exploring his basement and we found a boarded-up tunnel. Looked like a boarded-up window. There was a cord of wood stacked in front of it. We finally got the boards off and discovered a hole that went about 30 feet under the house towards the road, Main Street. We asked his parents what it was, and they told us it was a link to the old underground railroad that slaves used to escape to the north, actually to Buffalo, and then across to the Canadian border. We did some research at the town library, and from everything we could find it appeared to be true. I guess there was once a network of tunnels under the town, and this house was on top of one of those very pathways. While exploring my house, I found a couple of secret storage areas. One of them was in the wall behind a bookshelf, but there was nothing there. The other one was beneath the cupboard in my kitchen that held a couple of $100 in cash and a note from the previous owner of the house. basically saying to take care of the house and wishing us luck. I wonder if he left it there for us to find as a, well, gesture of goodwill. Who knows? My high school used to have a hole in the side of a staircase. It looped around, and the drywall leading to the underside of it appeared to be smashed. There were a bunch of music stands and various things blocking it, so I thought I couldn't get to it. I never really bothered because I assumed it was just a hole in the drywall. One day in between school and my drumline rehearsal, me and a few friends played hide and seek in the school. I was looking for them and I just knew one of them was under those stairs. I moved all of the stands and crawled into the little hole. It was really dark, so I turned the flashlight and shined it. None of my friends were there, but I guess it was a place of worship for an interesting group of people in our school, as there was a pentagram on the floor and handprints and messages on the wall that I hope were done in dark red paint. I remember "Death is Release," but I can't remember the other one. Also in the same paint was a picture of what looked like a demon. I immediately got my friends and showed them, and they were just as freaked out. We didn't talk about it ever again, and before I could show anyone, the school had fixed the drywall. When I was around 20, I found a hidden speakeasy in a pizza place. I went to a birthday party at this pizza place in the Dallas area with games, and one of the kids' dads owned it. There was a payphone mounted to the wall in the bathroom hallway, and I was messing with it when the whole wall swung open and the payphone attached. There was a bunch of people in there and a bar and an elevated dancing stage, and everybody just turned to look at me, and I pulled the door closed. I told the kid's dad who owned the place, and he knew of it. He also showed me a bricked wall that swung like a door and had an office room behind it, and a door in the floor that pulled up, and there were stairs to a basement that we didn't go down. The upstairs of my old house had a removable wall. It was a rental and built in the 1920s. The upstairs was basically one big loft room with these weak as crap cardboard type walls. I guess it was to make the room feel more like a room and less like an attic. It had a big walk-in closet on one side, and the other was split in half with the stairway. On the left side of the stairway, it had a dresser built into the wall and a little closet. On the right side, a tiny metal cupboard, and that was it, or so we thought. One day I was moving my bookcase and I pushed it far and hit the wall on the right side, and the whole wall just fell down. Turns out the wall was a removable panel with a small room behind it. It was papered in old newspapers and had 2 or 3 rotten mattresses in it, and one small bedside table and a tiny cupboard thing. It seriously creeped me out. What the hell happened in that room? This wasn't my house, but when I was looking to purchase, it was one that I got to explore and look at. One thing that really struck me about this house was that the laundry room had been raised up from the garage/street level, so it was even with the house. A bit weird, but okay. Anyway, in this laundry room was a tiny door, a Being John Malkovich door wedged back by the water heater. Odd. This laundry room had another regular-sized door. Well, let's see what's behind door number 2. Oh look, a shower and toilet, not on the listing, clearly not done with a permit. No sink, okay, classy. Also, it was a terrifying stairwell to the street level. No rails, just an open pit with steep steps going 3 inches almost straight down. Maybe not lethal, but certainly an ankle breaker. On with the tour. My realtor and I were making our way around and wind up in the room that the tiny door led to. The tiny door is in a closet. We're both scratching our heads, trying to figure out why the door is there, and stepping around the huge puddle from the leaky skylight. I pop back out towards the outside of the house, and then I see it. A lock on the house side of the door. Some poor guy rented that room. They had to enter up the terrifying stairs to the laundry room and crawl on hands and knees to reach their bedroom. If they wanted to use the bathroom, back through the tiny door. Here, wash your hands in the shower, I guess. They should have just gotten a prison toilet. When I was about 7, I was living in a 50 or so year old house that we'd done a lot fixing up on. One day we go to plant a tree and find our perfect spot in the backyard and begin digging. Not long into the process, we hit metal and decided to check it out. Turned out to be a hatch, so we opened it and went down. The floor probably had about 2 feet of dirt at the bottom, and we quickly discovered it was a bomb shelter. We found some sweet red lipstick along with a mirror. One Halloween, after we had lived in our house for about 8 years, a dad taking his kids trick-or-treating stopped at the end of our driveway and complimented us on the house. The original house was around 100 years old, but when we bought it, it had been remodeled extensively. He said that as a kid, he was always terrified of the house and the old lady who lived there. He then proceeded to tell us how when he was a teenager, him and his friends would dare one another to go into the woods behind our house, dig up the dirt over the trap door, and climb down the ladder over the tunnel that led to a door in our basement. Needless to say, we checked out our basement, the part from the original house, and sure enough, behind the furnace is a bricked-over doorway. We searched the woods a bit, but never found the trap door or the tunnel. The oddest bit of all, when my kids were very young before we learnt about it, they would never cross the room directly above the basement wall where the door was. They said that's where the ghostie lived in the wall, and she scared them. When I was a kid, I lived in an old house in a tiny town in Indiana. There were storage rooms on either side of the house, and the house was built into a hillside. The first floor at the top of the hill, basement to garage at the bottom of the hill. We stored bikes and the grill in one storage room, and on the other stored our playthings like my Fisher-Price kitchen and buckets and stuff. I liked to play house, so I would take a broom out of the storage room and open it up to sweep the dirt. The whole floor was dirt, so I swept it a lot. I swept it so much that I discovered train tracks, actual train tracks. I was a kid. I didn't really understand certain terms weren't meant to be taken literally. I thought my house had been part of the Underground Railroad because there was a railroad underground in my house. My grandma had bought a restaurant in a small town about a decade ago and had the entire family come up and help clean. My cousins and I were wandering around the place and we ended up in the kitchen. I decided to open the freezer doors and ended up finding a staircase going downwards at the very back. Of course, we had to check it out. Turns out there used to be an underground mall under this restaurant many years ago that went under, and now the town completely forgot about it. We looked into a hair salon that was down there, but we were too creeped out to continue. Now I totally wish we had continued walking through. As a teen, I worked construction for one summer. One of the jobs was stripping an old building of all the recyclable stuff before the building was knocked down. We found an entire empty floor that had no stop on the elevator. It would have been floor 13. The only way in was after we removed all the tiling from the ceiling. We found a place in the floor that had not been fully finished from above. It was an entire floor that was just all unfinished, bare concrete. I wonder if it's because floor 13 can be associated as a negative number. I'll never know for sure. I was working at a liquor store in Kansas. The owner once told me about the basement if we ever had a tornado. She showed me where the key was, and one day I took it home and made a copy. The basement was actually a whole separate piece of real estate she owned on the underground floor below her store. The only entrance was a little hidden stairwell in the back alley, so it was completely invisible unless you knew right where to look. The place looked like one of Jigsaw's warehouses, all cracked cinder block walls, cement floors, and cobweb ceilings. There was nothing down there, but there was a ton of space, probably 2,000 square feet of empty rooms of various shapes and sizes. The electricity worked, and there was even a working toilet, so I decided to keep my key long after I quit that job. For a long time I called it my secret hideout. I figured if I ever really needed to disappear for a while, I could grab a stack of books, some power bars, and a few gallons of water and hold up down there because no one ever came down there, even when there were tornadoes. When you're raised in Kansas, you're not really scared of them. Eventually, though, they demolished the building, and my hideout was gone before I ever had a chance to really use it. In high school, I was pretty involved with musicals and chorus. I wasn't that into it, but my friends were, and I wasn't absolutely terrible. Anyway, at one of our after-school rehearsals, a few of us snuck away, because there was this strange door behind the stage door that didn't seem to lead anywhere. It was perpetually locked, but for once it wasn't, as we checked it many times before. Curiosity got the better of us, so we went in. It seemed like a really average store space. That was until we noticed it didn't have a ceiling, and there was a 15-foot wall that clearly had some sort of area to walk at the top. We stupidly climbed the wall, nearly falling several times using the horizontal studs, and find the catwalk for the lighting crew. It was pretty interesting, mostly because we almost got caught several times. We wandered around it for a while, until we found a larger area with a mattress and a half-full box of condoms, apparently some of them used. We called it the sex room. One of us must have made a noise, because we heard the director say, "Who's up there?" We panicked and ran back to the scary wall, scaled it down, made it out, and exited the building through a door at the back of the stage on the right, and sprinted all the way around the school and made it back into the auditorium to make it look like we were just coming back from the bathroom. I wonder what that area was used for. Perhaps it was a secret teacher area that they used when the students weren't around, but honestly, I don't like to think about it. My husband's godfather was doing up their house, and the builders found something unexpected. It was a hidden room that was bricked up, but inside the room, they found a skeleton of a young person of about age 16. The house was hundreds of years old and used to be owned by monks. There was also a secret tunnel inside that went over to Island's Eye, a tiny island off Dublin. I would imagine that's what the monks used to escape all those years ago. Near my house was an abandoned sports centre, which contained, amongst other things, a pool, tennis courts, and a basketball court. I had long heard rumours of the existence of a tunnel linking the centre to a nearby mansion. Ever since I was a kid, I looked for this tunnel, and could never find it. I just found crawl spaces and other neat little areas. When I was around 22, I'd still take my time exploring the place and taking pictures here and there, and looking for the forbidden tunnel. One day, for whatever reason, I decided to step on a certain area of the ground and just listen for any hollow sounds. Sure enough, before long, I found the hollow sound. And checking around the area, I found a little access hole in the wall hidden behind some stuff. I put my hand in, and the air was cool and moving. So, I got into the tunnel, dropped down through this tiny hole by using some pipes. It did in fact lead me all the way to the mansion, which had a giant basement and a secret set of stairs, as well as a safe room. There was a part of the basement with fake windows, like fake nature scenes, almost to make you feel like you were outside, as well as a hidden staircase that spiraled upwards behind the walls of the mansion. I later heard it was used for sneaking servants around, and that the owner liked to engage in affairs with his servants. Anyway, I got up to the second floor, moving along the walls and figured there would not be a security system. So I relaxed and promptly set off an alarm, which was not silent, thank God. Well, let me tell you, I don't know if I have ever run so fast, all the way back through the mansion and the tunnel to hide inside a crawl space for a while until I knew I was safe. That was one hell of an adventure. My grandparents had a small cottage up near the coast. It was a small bungalow, quite long in shape. We had holidayed in this cottage in the summer months due to it being beside the sea. For years we stayed in it during the summer until one day my grandpa showed me a bookcase that was mounted on a wall above some shelves. He told me to push it. I did, and it swung open inwards. He then proceeded to point to the shelves below, which actually had things strategically placed on them to allow for footholds. I climbed up, and in was a cave of wonders. A huge comfy chair, a hi-fi, a massive TV. Off this small room was a long corridor that ran along the inside of the roof. It was carpeted with paintings on the walls, and there was a bed at one end and a small bathroom. There was also a desk. My grandfather is a keen drawer and had used this den to disappear into the drawer. It had windows with a great view over the bay outside. For years, this had been his secret place and he had just shared it with me. I was amazed. It looked incredible. Looking at it from the outside, you would never have guessed such a cave of wonders existed. The University of Illinois steam tunnels. I may or may have not gone there for undergrad, and I may or may not have explored the series of hidden tunnels underground after having a few adult beverages. I think they're less frequented these days now that some entrances have been discovered by the administration and sealed, but they run for miles and are still utilized as a means to get heat to different buildings on campus. If you make your way down southwest near the Six Packs, it gets really hot and muggy. Closer to the quad, they're much more manageable. The best part is that there are frequent exits all along the form of ladders up the sidewalk. Those doors are locked from the outside, but you can pop out whenever you want. If anyone is nearby or actually attends, it may be worth a visit if they're still open. When I was in college, my significant other's sister was having her sweet 16th party. It was out in the middle of nowhere on a plantation with an extremely old house on it. While checking the house out with the owner, they explained that there were passages everywhere throughout the house, and they walked over to what used to be the master bedroom, which was on the second floor. When the house was built and opened up the closet, there on the floor was a hatch. Under the hatch was a winding staircase that led to the maid quarters. Basically, the master of the house would regularly sneak off to have continued affairs with his maid. My high school was previously called Florida Air Academy. It changed now to some preparatory school. It's one of the oldest buildings in the state of Florida and was a hotel before becoming a boarding school. Back in the 1920s, Al Capone was one of the hotel's normal residents and obviously paid the owner a fair amount to allow him to stay. But Al Capone also had a series of tunnels not too deep in Florida. Because we're so close to the ocean and sea level, the tunnels nonetheless from the kitchen, library, and behind what is now our football field. It was always a sort of myth around the school since no one was allowed to see them because they were completely unsafe. If anyone was caught near them, they would get a restriction, i.e., you'd stayed during the weekends and worked for the school. But one time during my senior year, I basically said screw it and wanted to just see what was going on with them and see if they actually were his tunnels. One day I was working in the library helping out the librarian who liked me a bit more because I never caused her problems. She had me pull some books back on the shelves by the passageway. It had an old master lock holding the latch. I pulled it and the lock was broken. It had been corroded for years. I popped the door open and made sure no one was looking at me. It was old and decrepit, but they were for sure tunnels. There were old signs that mapped out the paths, and they said where they led to. They were his personal escape tunnels from the police, and had 4 to 5 around, 2 more that previously thought led to other landmarks near the hotel in the surrounding town, so that he could get away if the police were called. 10 out of 10, one of the coolest places I've ever explored, although I didn't go further than maybe 10 feet inside because I didn't want to get a restriction or expelled. I wish I'd had taken a picture, but we had to turn our phones in this year because one kid in my grade ended up hacking into the school's program and they didn't want it to happen again, so they made us turn in all our phones and computers for a long time. We lived in a townhome that had 2 secret tunnels. One wasn't really a secret, they told us about it when we moved in. Under the stairs, they had walled off and put a door to make a storage space. They had an access panel in the floor. They told us to stay out of it and keep it uncovered so they could access it. My husband, being who he is, goes in and finds it, completely under our house and the one attached to it. He could have crawled next door and popped in their storage space under the stairs. The second was upstairs in the back of the master bedroom closet. It was small but led to a large crawl space that was lined with tinfoil and obviously had signs that someone else had found it and decided to grow weed in it. I used to do property management at high-end ski resorts and was checking properties one day, which consisted of making sure the water was off, checking pipes, basic winterization stuff. I went down the hot water room of a fairly big house. I had been in numerous times and noticed a weird button beside the tank. I had been in this particular room dozens of times but never noticed it on the wall before. The hot water was mostly a large storage room, but had a huge bookshelf against the wall. My curiosity finally got the best of me a few weeks later and I pushed the button. The bookshelf then rotated completely around, revealing a panic room equipped with a phone and nothing else in the room. Needless to say, this is the first and only time I have found a hidden room. Back when I was 18, I was up north visiting friends, and we ended up going to their buddy's house to hang out. It was rumored to be a $10 million house. It was on a ton of property and the house was just enormous. The inside had an indoor/outdoor pool. Inside it had about a 12-foot rock that you could climb up and jump off of. When you made your way up to the 3rd floor, there was this tube sticking out of the wall. The guy says hop in, so I did, and it took me swirling down through the house inside of a water slide right into the indoor pool. There was a bathroom on the 2nd floor. On the wall in the shower was a giant slate of stone. There was a light switch just outside of the shower. The switch didn't do anything. However, if you pried the light switch off the giant slate of the stone inside of the shower, it opened a secret passageway that led to a whole house inside of the house. There was a stockpiled kitchen. In the bar area, there was a giant one-way window that led to the indoor pool. The kids say that it was made so that it could be lived into for up to 60 days without stepping outside the regular house. My old job had a hidden room in the office. We had just moved into a new office and there was a space that was meant to be a lunchroom type area, and the owner had a wall built in halfway up the doorframe. The door could still open, but you'd have to jump over this mini wall. Then hung a huge painting over the remaining of the door. He said that it was in case of burglaries. It doubles as an IT closet with the servers containing all the codes, network switches and Wi-Fi routers. He was being investigated by the RCMP for one of the projects, that it may be a scam. One day he let go all of the developers for the project team. He had the IT guy securely wipe the computers and put the computers in that room. Then one day not long after, we were raided by the RCMP. We had security cameras that were accessible through the internet, so we were able to go back and watch what happened. They took every computer they could find and everything remotely technical, but seeing the footage you can see the guy connected to the network, but unable to figure out where on earth the network's coming from. They never found the room, and thus where the server and computers they were looking for were. The company shut down very soon after. The building was taken as part of an asset seizure for the money he owed. I saw the posting of it on a realtor website. The painting is still there. I can only imagine the surprise for whoever ended up buying it. Hey guys, it's Mort here. Thank you so much for listening to tonight's video. With this topic in particular, it's hard to find stories that both involve a secret passage and have something horrific happen in nature. Like we found, we had a few that, were pretty grim, but there's just not enough detail to really make it a full-on story. Nonetheless, I hoped, like me, you found the stories interesting for what they were and appreciated them. If you did like them, be sure to let me know down below. I would like to extend a huge thank you to my members and patrons. Currently, I've got a little glitch where it isn't exporting any of the text, which is very annoying, so there's nothing on screen. But once I get this fixed, yeah, I've updated it, and I hope you like it. It looks pretty cool. Until then, guys, I wish you all the best. Stay awesome. If you want to watch something else, check out a video links on screen. But if not, see you in the next one. Thanks, guys.